Sitting on the northeast shoulder of South America is the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Meaning land of many waters, Guyana is the southernmost English-speaking state of the Caribbean community. It is one of the world's most pristine natural habitats and has one of the highest levels of biodiversity. But the Guyanese population of 800,000 also has riches that, until now, have remained hidden, offshore. To understand Guyana's present-day opportunity, we need to travel back through the mists of time to over 250 million years ago, when our world looked very different. The supercontinent of Pangaea was being pulled apart into the landmasses of North America, South America, Eurasia, and Africa. A part of the new ocean that was created is the Guyana Basin. And it is here that the ground was laid for today's exploration success. The Berbice Submarine Canyon, as big as the famous Grand Canyon, provided a highway for sediments flowing into the deeper ocean. Thousands of cubic kilometers of sand were deposited in the Guyana Basin. Some of these sands were destined to become the host rock of the modern-day Liza Field. The reservoir sands were then covered by more than 3,000 meters of sealing muds. Slowly, over millions of years, oil, created by the cooking of marine organic matter, migrated into the porous sandstone. Then, in the 21st century, 3D seismic illuminated its existence. Exploration was then intensified to further understand the potential of the Guyana Basin. With its partners, ExxonMobil undertook its largest ever proprietary 3D seismic survey. The Liza 1 exploration well discovered high-quality oil trapped in the pores of the sandstone. A year later, a second well, Liza 2, helped to confirm the size of the Liza discovery, estimated to be between 800 million and 1.4 billion barrels of oil equivalent. The oil-bearing sands are buried some 3,600 meters under the seabed, in a water depth of approximately 1,700 meters. The Liza field lies around 200 kilometers from Georgetown in the Stabroek Block. The initial phase of the field development plan calls for 2 drill centers linked back to a floating production, storage, and offloading vessel, or FPSO. Around 17 wells will be drilled into the reservoirs. About half of these are production wells, taking the precious hydrocarbons up to the surface. The other half are water and gas injection wells. As the reservoir is depleted, the pressure drops. Water and gas injection helps to maintain pressure and maximize oil recovery. The technology used here will set an industry record for deepwater gas injection. Umbilical lines provide real-time control of the subsea installation from the surface and deliver fluids to encourage the flow of hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons travel from the trees through manifolds and into flow lines before risers take the fluids from the seabed up to the FPSO. The FPSO is a floating industrial complex, continually separating water and gas from the oil, and is capable of storing 1.6 million barrels. Tankers visit to export Guyana's first oil to market. By the middle of 2020, the Liza field plans will have become a reality. The development will keep delivering its valuable commodity over a further 2 decades, providing a new source of prosperity for the people of Guyana.
Well, welcome to El Dorado. Welcome to the Guyana of today and of the future. Black gold is here. Now, that ExxonMobil film dates back 3 years to 2019 and first oil. Now, that's a lifetime in Guyana oil terms. Since billions of barrels of oil have been found, some brought up and refined, good, sweet crude, which at current world prices can be sold at 500% profit. Already by the oil prices can be sold at 500% profit. Already by the end of this year, Guyana will have close to $1 billion United States dollars in a sovereign wealth fund. That's transformational. This is the second biggest find in the last 20 years. Offshore Guyana is a new Klondike, truly Sir Walter Raleigh's city of gold in spades. Tonight, to mark the third edition of my bestseller, El Dorado, available on Amazon worldwide, and looking forward to the fourth in the autumn, we've assembled a star series of discussants. First, Sanjeev Dattadeen, if he shows, then a critic and chronicler, Christopher Ram, a US analyst, Arthur Deakin, Torsi Dowell, Kirby's boy made good in the oil fields of Texas, and 2 Guyanese-born professors, Terence Blackman in New York and Terence Yip in Toronto. First, though, let's have some facts and figures from an ace legal brain in the oil industry, Sally Gibson. What's more, she's of Guyanese stock. Tell us the size and shape of the new El Dorado, please, Sally. Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Phil, is it possible to go into the slides? Thank you very much. Is that full screen, please? So I think it's different. That's lovely. Thank you. So it's my job to set the scene for the discussion today, and I'm going to do a brief step through the discoveries made and what that means for Guyana. I then look at what's happening in the Stabroek and the other blocks, then moving on to the revenues and the impact on the economy, and finally the government plans for spending the revenues. Next slide, please. So where better to start than Sir Walter Raleigh? A year after he came to Guyana in search of El Dorado, he wrote a book on the discovery of Guyana, and he said that Guyana had more quantity of gold by manifold than the best parts of the Indies or Peru. He added that all corners of Guyana appear marvelous rich. As we know, he didn't find El Dorado, but he was clearly looking in the wrong place. So as you can see, the standard color for the Stabroek block is yellow, and I think our seam of gold has been found. Next slide, please. So here it is, the Stabroek block in all its glory. So oil exploration isn't new to Guyana. The Dutch found onshore seepages in the 1700s. But offshore activity didn't start until 1958, and it's been an endeavor over many decades. So fast forward some 60 years later to the Stabroek block. And Liza 1 was the first commercial discovery made in 2015. So as we've seen from the video, the block is located offshore in deep water, and that's about 5,000 feet to the seabed. It's 6 million acres, which, if you put it into square miles, is about the size of 30 New Yorks. So it's huge. The discoveries contain oil and associated gas, which we'll no doubt be touching on. And as the video says, oil is produced through the FPSOs, which is short for floating production, storage, and offloading vessels. When the oil was first discovered in 2015, the resource base was estimated to be some 800 to 1.4 billion barrels. But the pace of exploration has now been unrelenting, and only some 7 years later, we have 25 discoveries, and with a staggering resource base of 11 billion barrels. Yet there's more to be discovered, and it's reported as much as 20 billion barrels with deeper horizons yet to be explored. Next slide, please. So Stabroek is not the whole story. So there are 8 other blocks apart from Stabroek. But as you can see on the side there's 4 that I've highlighted as of interest. That's the Kanji, the Kaichur, the Corentyne and the Orinduik. Two of those, the first two, are operated by ExxonMobil. Wells have been drilled on all 4 blocks, and although discoveries have been made, they're not commercial as standalone developments. Further discoveries could be made that would make the oil commercially viable. And Exxon plans to drill a further 12 wells across the Kanji and Kaijil blocks, which says something about the prospectivity of the blocks as seen by ExxonMobil. The fact remains, however, that so far the only proven commercial discoveries still remain in Stabroek. Next slide, please. So, production. Returning now to Stabroek, what does this really mean for Guyana? So at the moment we have Liza 1 and Liza 2 in production, and as you can see there, the barrels being produced per day is 360,000. So 2 further developments have been approved, which is the Payara and the Yellowtail, expected to come on stream. Payara in 2023 and Yellowtail in 2025. So, we're moving on. There's another 5th development already in process, Uaru and Mako. So this means that Guyana, we take all of the production, the expected production from all 5, will be producing more than 1 million barrels in 5 years' time. So what does that really mean? So based on current oil prices, we're looking at $133 million per day. But if you take a more conservative oil price of, say, $65, we're talking about $72 million per day. So that's production from 5 FPSOs, but ExxonMobil expects to have 10 FPSOs to produce the 11 billion resources that found so far. Next slide, please. So this table shows the revenues and the royalties so far received by the government. The revenues for this year, you can see, is $112 million, but another 9 liftings are expected, which at current oil prices, which would mean the revenues will be around $1 billion. And to put this in perspective, in 2018, Guyana's total government revenues was only 1.4 billion. That's from all sectors. Looking at the graph, which is only intended to be representational, the government estimates that Guyana revenues will be a staggering $50 to $200 billion in 2050. So that's rising from 1 billion in 2022. There's a huge range, 50 to 200 million, but it reflects uncertainties in oil price and further discoveries. Next slide, please. So I think it has been said that there's an alternative universe sitting on the northeast shoulder of South America. And these 2 graphs show the World Bank view of what this all means for the Guyana economy. So looking at the GDP, first graph, real GDP growth in 2019, just before the first cargo was lifted, was 5.4%. And the forecasted growth for 2022 is 47%. This GDP growth rate compares to the year-on-year change in economic output, and it's a measure of how fast the economy is growing. Now, looking at the second graph, the per capita growth, sorry, not the growth, but just per capita, the per capita, which is a close correlation in trends in living standards over time, shows that in 2019, we had $6,100 per head of population, whereas in 2022, we're expecting $17,100. So that's a nearly 200% increase. So it has been said that Guyana is expected to become the highest per capita oil producer in the world, ahead of Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and we can go on, and even Norway. So next slide, please. So gas to shore. So as already mentioned, the oil includes associated gas. This is going to be brought at the moment. So at the moment, it's currently being re-injected, but we expect that 50 million cubic feet of gas will be brought ashore from Lisa 1 and Lisa 2 and processed in a natural gas liquids processing plant, which is going to be built and operated by ExxonMobil. You might have seen the press this morning that the question of ownership of that plant is up for debate. So the plant will be at Wales and it will come ashore at Crane. When the NGLs plant is built, it will produce propane, butane and pentanes, and it's expected to be sold to third parties. The dry gas will be sold to the government and be used in a power plant, also built at Wales. So the power plant is expected to generate 250 megawatts of electricity, which will reduce the current electricity price from 32 cents per kilowatt hour to about 6 or 7 cents. Well, that's the ultimate goal, but I think initially it would probably be about 14, 15 cents per kilowatt. So the government sees this gas to shore project as transformational because it will cut the price of electricity. It will provide energy reliability and reduce emissions by using gas instead of fuel oil. So, and then finally, the expectation is that Wales will become an industrial hub and all the benefits that comes with that. Next slide, please. So, last slide, you'll be pleased to know, using the oil revenues. So, Guyana's recognised that it's exposed to climate vulnerability since 2009, and it entered into agreements at that time to preserve its standing rainforest, namely with Norway. There have been a number of low-carbon development strategies issued since 2009, and the latest one is LCDS 2030, which is in the consultation phase. The LCDS 30 is at the centre of how the government plans to use the oil revenues. The intention is to promote economic development while at the same time addressing climate change. The LCDS 30 states that the oil revenues will be used to achieve a low-carbon transition by developing gas, solar, wind, hydropower, and the maintenance of the rainforest. Also, the government intends to diversify the economy by promoting the development of non-oil sectors and improving the digital and the physical infrastructure. They also want to promote higher living standards by investing in health and education. And no doubt we will move on to discuss some of these issues. Next slide, please.
Perhaps we could
Thank you very much.
See Sally, and I just want to ask you one question. Sally,
Sure.
How does this oil find compare to other oil finds in Latin America, indeed the rest of the world?
Well, I think at the moment it's huge for Guyana, but not that huge. And I think Guyana, if you look at the table, it's probably ranking down around. Don't quote me because this is off the top of my head. Probably in terms of around number 40 in terms of production, but it's going to go up and up. And it's, as I say, it's going to meet the $1 million barrels per day production, which is a select club.
Another question. Surely it's a contradiction to have an LCDS and to be extracting oil. How do you square that circle?
Well, I think the oil isn't the answer in itself, and you have to be able to, and with the government using it to move on and implement the low carbon strategy. So you can square it. It's an easy one to complete the circle, or square or the circle. Don't see any. Yeah, I mean, lots been said about it, and I think we can only go forward and see how it pans out. But the intention is, the government intend to monetize the forest, and to do so, the rainforest, in terms of the carbon capture that there's the carbon that's sequestered there. So in order to do so, they have to have a low carbon strategy, and if not, the rest of the world won't be interested in buying into their carbon capture.
Sally, thank you very much. That's all very clear to the point. Now let's join Arthur Deakin, who I think is in Washington DC, who's an analyst for American Markets International. Arthur, how do you see the Guyana oil? Give us your views on facts, figures, and futures.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you for having me. Apologies, I'm not on camera, but I'm in transit right now. So, just brief background. My name is Arthur Deacon. I work at AMI. We're a market intelligence firm focused on Latin America. So, in terms of, Sally did a very good job covering the facts and figures there of the oil finds. I think what's really important to keep in mind is that if Guyana doesn't build the infrastructure that they're developing right now for their oil and gas extraction and production in a transition ready mindset, it is possible that it'll find itself with stranded assets. And what I mean by transition ready is that, the gas pipelines, and if they end up building an export terminal for gas as well, ensuring that that infrastructure can handle low carbon fuels like renewable natural gas, synthetic methane, hydrogen in the mid to long term future. And I think that's something that Guyana is not really thinking about right now. They're just thinking about developing it as fast as possible, and missing that opportunity to develop that infrastructure in a transition ready mindset. I know some of these technologies are not yet feasible, such as carbon capture, but you got to start, piloting these technologies in Guyana to ensure that when you develop the gas to shore plant and when you develop the pipelines, you can implement this transition ready infrastructure. So that's just something I wanted to point out.
I mean, how realistic is the gas to shore plant? It's going to cost $1 billion US. Is that right? The whole scheme?
Yeah, just over $1 billion. It's very realistic. It's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. I think what's still being determined is the final prices between Exxon and the government over the gas, and how much of gas is going to come from the Liza 1 and Liza 2 wells. There's the FPSOs. I mean, there's 50 million cubic feet is being discussed, but there's a lot more gas out there in these discoveries. I think the estimates are around 20% of the reserves in the Starbeck block are gas. So I think Guyana has a tremendous opportunity to monetize that gas, not only regionally to other countries in Latin America that need lower carbon generation sources such as gas, but also to Europe and Asia, where there's going to be a deficit caused by the Ukraine invasion.
So how do they do that? Do they freeze it and ship it and send it
that
way?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Europe and Asia, yes, it would have to be liquefied and sent via ships. And that's a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment. And that's why you're going to need private investors and private operators from the US, from Europe, to come in and develop that infrastructure. But there is a massive opportunity for those players. We see already Peru in Latin America increasing their LNG exports to Europe and other places around the world. Trinidad and Tobago, one of Guyana's neighbors, is declining their LNG exports because of lack of investment, U.S. competitiveness with their own LNG. So, there's a big opportunity there for Guyana and even Suriname as well, whose findings seem to be much more gas than what we're seeing in Guyana so far.
So the government has to be open to investment in gas as well as in oil, and massive investment. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of focus is going on the oil, which makes sense. It's something that can be monetized more quickly. I think there's more information around the oil finds than the gas. Is still a little bit unclear, the total amount of reserves. But most definitely, it shouldn't be just focused on piping the gas to shore and cutting electricity costs, like Sally said, which is important, but also exporting to other countries in the region and globally as well.
Now, Vice President Jagdeo, who is effectively the oil supremo in Guyana, who hasn't accepted my invitation to take part in this. He's very keen on a national oil company. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I personally think we've written a couple articles on this. We've done research, and we personally think here at AMI that it's not a good idea. We've seen national oil companies around the world, especially in Latin America, be really involved in corruption, in cronyism, inflated contracts, overinflated expenses. So a national oil company is not really a good idea for Guyana, and it would be, as we expect, it would be basically operated by a Middle Eastern partner in a joint venture, who would have 90% of the employees, because Guyana as of now doesn't have the local training or the local capacity or the local human resources to be part of that national oil company. So essentially would be a Middle Eastern operated national oil company, at least for the next decade. And Guyana would just assume more risk, because the national oil company would be focused on these blocks, Block C, I believe, that haven't been auctioned yet, and there's no studies yet in terms of the reserves. So they would be assuming risk by joining, partnering with this Middle Eastern company and exploring and investing money into an oil block that there's just no proven reserves yet. Of course, there's surrounding reserves that are very promising, but that block in specific, which the national oil company would assume, is still very prospective. So yeah, lots of risk and not many benefits in my view.
Now, Guyana is developing links with Ghana, strong links with Ghana. What have they got to learn from Ghana, positively and negatively, in terms of the oil and gas industry?
Yeah, Ghana, I think in terms of Ghana, what the most valuable lesson for Guyana is with their local content law. And, Ghana actually had a pretty unsuccessful, I would say, local content law, in the sense that the thresholds for local companies were way too high, which led to the inability from foreign operators and foreign energy companies to comply with those thresholds. So it ended up being counterintuitive and not working to its purpose, which is to develop the local industry, develop local capital. So I think that's something that Guyana has already noticed, because their first local content bill, the threshold of different requirements was quite high, and they reduced it to more realistic standards in the local content law that was published. So there's a lot of things in the local content law that could be improved, but overall, that's something that was a positive from their studies of Ghana and other countries.
Now, briefly, and to end, do you feel positively or negatively about the prospects for Guyana and Guyanese benefiting from this oil find?
I feel positive, but I think that it's a multifaceted development story. It's not just development of oil, but you have to develop all the existing the needed infrastructure around it. Gas, as I mentioned, you need to develop petrochemical industries, industrial hubs with the gas to shore. Agriculture, which is a big part of Guyana's economy, has to continue producing and remain competitive in a regional scale. Mining still very important for Guyana. So if you only focus on the energy sector and ignore these other surrounding sectors, which most of Guyanese people work on, then the development just won't be uniform. It will be very lopsided towards the oil and gas development. So it is positive, but again, Guyana has had a lot of troubles with corruption in the past, with some fiscal issues. You need to hold the people in power accountable constantly, and make sure that the monies are being spent transparently. If not, the basically the growth that Guyana can achieve won't be achieved, not even close.
Arthur, thank you very much. It's very clear. If we could perhaps see the book cover, this is an event, a webinar to mark the third edition of the book I did, Oil Dorado, Ghana the Black Gold, which is in the third edition. It's a bestseller in Ghana, which is no hard thing to achieve, and indeed available from Amazon, available in the public library in Guyana, and indeed all the university libraries. Meanwhile, let's move on, shall we? Let's move on to Sanjeev Dattadeen. The message obviously didn't get through to Continental Park that he was due to be on this afternoon, so he's not here. Let's move on to Tulsi Dal Singh, if we can. Tulsi is in Midland, Texas, although I think he's possibly now in a hotel in Dallas. Tulsi is born in Palmyra, the home of famous people like him and Clem Ciceran, and soon to be the airport for Berbice. But then, as a doctor, went to Texas at a young age and made a fortune there, but not in medicine, but actually in investing in gas. Tulsi, are you hopeful for Guyana?
Yes, I'm very optimistic about Guyana.
Why?
Well, I think that there is a lot of potential there, and I think the size of the recoverable potential reserve is significant. You know, I look at the United States Geological Survey of 2000, and then they estimated that there was 15.2 billion barrels of oil in the Guyana-Suriname basin. But most of that, from the look at the map, seems to be over in Guyana, and I'll come back to that in a second. Gas, 42.1 billion cubic feet, and natural gas, natural gas liquids, 2.3 billion barrels. Let's go back to oil. They estimated back then that there was from a low of 2.8 billion barrels to a high of 36.2 billion barrels. The current recoverable reserve that Exxon has found is estimated at 11 billion barrel equivalents. Now that contains both oil and gas liquids. So using the data from the FPSOs, I estimate that between 15 and maybe even as high as 20% of that 11 billion in barrels in equivalent could be gas and natural gas liquids, and about 80% as oil. So we're using the present estimate of 11 billion. I estimate that there is probably about 9 billion barrels of oil, and the rest in natural gas liquids and natural gas. Rystad and IHS Markit, two consulting firms that look at reserves, have postulated that the oil component could be significantly higher than the 11 billion we're currently talking about, and could be nearly twice as much. In which case, we're looking at a total reserve of 22 billion barrels, with about 18 of that being in oil. However, keep in mind that the number that we're looking at includes both the Guyana and the Suriname basin, and I think that about 80% of that is in the Guyana side of that basin. One thing to keep in mind about Suriname is that their present estimated reserve, according to the EIA, is only 89 billion barrels. But they're estimating that there might be a total of 2 billion barrels on the Suriname side, and hopefully the rest is on the Guyana side. One thing we need to be careful is that Exxon has been in active exploration for 7.5 years. And you would think that by now they would have picked off all the sweet spots. So a reserve of 11 billion now doesn't necessarily translate to 22 billion or higher over the next 20, 25 years. Another thing to keep in mind that the other blocks so far near to the Stabroek block has been essentially just a show of oil, but not commercially ready, at least not even at today's prices. So we need to temper our enthusiasm that the rest of the offshore Guyana blocks has as much oil as the Stabroek block. Also keep in mind that the Suriname block, Block 58, which is right adjacent to the Stabroek block, has been relatively modest in what they've found so far. And the other thing is, there's not been a whole lot of rush to get the other blocks in Suriname. So I would think that Guyana is going to have more of the Guyana Suriname basin oil than Suriname will have. Now, the question of how much money will Guyana get? I'm going to say at least 150 billion US dollars over the next 30 years. And if oil over the next 27, 28 year averages around $120 as it is now, in fact, it's a little higher now, then Guyana's stake would be 367 billion US dollars over the next 30 years. And that's just using the present recoverable reserve. If they find more and produce more, then that 367 billion at $120 a barrel could be a whole lot higher. But let me use my conservative number, that the price of oil over the next 20, 25 years is going to average $68 a barrel. And that the volume recovered will be 10 billion barrels. Capital expenditure of $8 per barrel and operating expenses of $32 per barrel. That will generate a profit of $280 billion US, and Guyana's half would be 140 billion, or roughly 79.4% of the oil found. No, I didn't say that right. Eliminate that sentence. Okay, Guyana would get 140.
Let me help you a little bit, if I can, Torsti. So we're talking about massive, massive figures here in terms of revenue. I mean, 150 billion, 36 billion to Guyana. What will this mean to the average man in the Palmyra street and the Palmyra back down?
Well, apart from the airport, let's skip that one. But how should we spend that money? If I were a Guyanese, and if I had any say in the matter, keep in mind I'm not a Guyanese, I've been long gone, I would divide that revenue into four baskets. The first one is to live, second one to build, the third one is to save, and the fourth one is to give. Four different baskets based on those parameters. Live for immediate improvement in quality of life, social security, public safety, education, starting with pre-education at the University of Guyana and other tertiary places. Improvement in health, sanitation, the environment, arts, sports, and recreation. Build, here I'm talking about long-term infrastructure. Technical colleges for power generation, as we've talked about, and poldering most of the coastal area for aquaculture and agriculture. Build a transshipment port, build roads parallel to the coast, and put in a 1/2 mile wide transportation corridor from Brazil to near to Georgetown on the other side of the river. The third would be the third basket, save. That will be the National Resource Fund, and at $150 million, putting a quarter of what is coming in over the next 30 years. That 1 quarter of 150, roughly 37, would have been, in terms of growth at 6-7%, would be over 100 billion US in 30 years, by which time the oil will be done. And the fourth one to me is very important, and that is to give. You know, people laughed when Clive Thomas proposed the Buxton proposal. But I think that let's take 6 years from now, when Guyana will be receiving at least $6 billion US. A quarter of that, 1.5 billion, Well, 1.5 billion divided by the 300,000 families, if there are that many, would generate more than $1 million Guyana dollars per family in Guyana, and that will get people interested in this.
So you'd give each family $5,000 US, would you? Approximately.
When the revenue stream tops $4 billion US a year.
What's to stop them spending the money in the rum shop or in other ways?
Well, people say that, but what they have found is that a small number of people will do that, but most people will use it to buy a car. Most people will use it to fix up their house, fence the yard, put in a nice bridge over the drainage ditch, buy kitchen appliances. It's very easy for us to say, "Oh, these people are going to waste the money." Well, my parents wouldn't have done that. My parents would not have used it. Oh, sure, they might have gotten a beer or something like that, but 95% of the dollars that they got would have gone to helping improve the situation of the family and the situation in the households.
Let's talk about the C word. How worried are you about corruption?
Well, corruption is a real concern. It's and wherever there is oil, there's corruption. It's not unique to Guyana. I think Guyana is not only corruption, cronyism. I think corruption in Guyana is more tied to cronyism. People are concerned about that money leaving Exxon and getting into the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas. Well, that's not where the problem is. The problem is when the money leaves the Federal Reserve Bank and goes to Guyana. Okay, and from there is who get the contracts. There are going to be a lot to do the things that I talked about earlier. That infrastructure and all of that would take a lot of money. Who get those contracts? The politicians give it to themselves, their family, their friends, their relatives. Cronyism and corruption goes hand in hand.
Last time we spoke, I asked whether you were to invest in Guyana. Have you changed your mind?
No, sir. I'm absolutely certain I will not be investing in Guyana. Where I am, last month we produced 5.14 million barrels of oil every single day. Okay, Guyana right now is producing less than about 250,000 barrels a day. There's a lot more opportunities for me here in Midland, Texas, here in the middle of the Permian Basin, than there will be in Guyana. Here I know the people, I know the law, I know where the money sources are, and I know how people operate. In Guyana, I'm afraid I don't know how the people operate.
Let's move on if we can. Dr. Terence Blackman, Professor Terence Blackman in New York. Are you hopeful for Guyana? Is the money going to trickle down to ordinary people in South Georgetown?
Well, good morning, John, and let me say Happy Father's Day to all of your listeners, and Juneteenth for the folks who are here. So the answer is yes. I am very optimistic for what can emerge in this process. I think as both Sally and Tulsi have and Arthur have spoken to, these revenues really are tremendous, and I think a conversation like the one that we're having, something that is political that can enable a kind of rational, objective discussion about how we use the oil resources is the kind of thing that I think I see emerging that goes to sort of ensuring that the future of Guyana is better than the future that we've seen before. Certainly, as has been mentioned, there is no question that there are enough resources to make effective investments in education, in workforce development and training, in creating the enabling environment that can support the private sector, business opportunities, that can support foreign direct investment, that can build the kind of infrastructure, as Sally talked about the gas to power project, that can build a kind of infrastructure that can really catalyze sort of a broader Guyanese development so that it is not lopsided, as Arthur mentioned, in terms of just focused on oil. And then I think we have these issues, as Tulsi just described of, sort of governance and transparency, the broad oil sector policy, should we have a national oil company, the larger geopolitical environment. But I think all things considered, all of the elements are in place for Guyana to really take off. And I really liked Tulsi's characterization of, how we split the buckets, to live, to build, to save, to give. And the only thing I would add, I mean, and as I start thinking about our title here, Oil Dorado, the only thing I would do is to remind people that, this myth of El Dorado, of the chieftain who would dive into the river covered with gold, and then finally the Spaniards drained the lake and didn't discover as much gold. And someone mentioned Walter Raleigh, and we know that, he visited Guyana and searched for El Dorado. I think we found the El Dorado. And the question is, do we have the wisdom and to really use the El Dorado in an effective manner? And I think I see, across the conversations, across the newspapers, the kind of emerging consensus that I think takes us in the right direction, and we don't fall victim to, the folks who went in search of El Dorado, who didn't find El Dorado.
Let's use another Guyanese word, the R word. Would you expect there to be any sort of racial differentiation in who gets what, and any conflict as a result of Dorado?
Guyana is fraught with racial conflict. I mean, I think that the ethnic tensions, the racial tensions, and the ethnic tensions are the elephant in the room. This is the thing that has the potential to completely disrupt Guyana's progress more than anything else. And what I see at this moment is, I follow, very closely, and I can sense that there are, following the last elections, there are these sort of tensions that have emerged among the two main racial groups in Guyana, the Afro and Indo-Guyanese. But I think it's time now for a certain kind of maturity in our politics. I think we have to begin to understand that we have a system that is in place, and we all have roles to play in that system. So, yes, I do think that that race can undermine the progress of Guyana, but I do think that, and I do see an emerging maturity on the side of the PPP. I see that also emerging on the side of the APNU-AFC. I see the various civil society groups kind of really stepping up and really filling the breach and sort of moving us away from that cliff that we almost got too close to during the course of the recent election. So I am, John, I am optimistic, but not unrealistic about what our history has bequeathed to us.
And now, in brief, is the future bright for El Dorado or not?
Yes, the future is bright. I think Tulsi just mentioned it's $150 billion over the course of the next 30 years. And that's a conservative estimate. There is more than enough for everyone. And I think what is required is just consensus at the level of the political leadership across the society broadly, to understand that you have to have a good healthcare system, that you have to have good education, that you have to have electricity, that you have to have all of these critical things that enable a society to progress. I mean, you can't give everyone $5,000 and not have electricity, right? And so I think that once you have this emerging consensus about what is good for the Commonwealth, then I think the sky is the limit. Guyanese are very smart people, and I think they understand very clearly this opportunity is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's one that really ought not to be missed. And I think that we will meet the challenge in this moment.
Thank you, Terence. Just to remind you, you're here as part of a delayed launch for El Dorado, which is a book edited by me of 20 essays, published by Bite Size, available on Amazon. So if you'd like to buy it, go to Amazon or go to the one bookshop in Guyana, to Austin's, and they will sell it to you. Now, penultimately, let's go to Toronto. We're going around the world today to Dr. Terence Yip. Dr. Yip, what's your view on El Dorado?
Well, thanks for everybody for this meeting and the group. Let me put it this way. I'm hopeful that Guyana will succeed, and the arguments are quite laid out by Tulsi and Terence, my namesake. But at the same time, I'm a realist, and when I look at the statistics, because I'm an economist, when I look at the statistics, I like to look at probabilities and likelihoods. And the odds of oil-rich countries succeeding are very low. Very, very low. Very few really make it. And right now we have living examples of it. Now, for example, Tulsi and Terence, they've said, and also Sally, we're expecting X billions, large amounts of money. They're just unrealistic amounts, but they're quite large. No matter how you look at it, it's a lot of money. But let me remind everyone that Nigeria has earned over a trillion US dollars since 1971 in oil exports. And I'll be talking of Nigeria in my presentation, but look where Nigeria is. It is still struggling with $2,000 per capita. In Human Development Index, it's in the basement. You look at many countries in Sub-Sahara, they're in terrible shape. You look at Ecuador. Look at our neighbor Trinidad and Tobago. Imagine if you were a Trinidadian back in 1960 and you're asking that question, how do you feel about Trinidad? I'm sure, he or she would have said, I'm very optimistic. Things are going to be right. We're going to be X $1,000 by year 2011 or whatnot. But look what's happening in Trinidad, and I'll be talking about Trinidad.
Terence, let's time is of the essence. Let's move on to your chart, if we can, which you've kindly supplied us with. Perhaps you'd talk us through that.
Yeah. Now, if you look at that chart, you'll see it's a tale of four cities. If I could kind of borrow a piece from Charles Dickens. The green light is actually Korea. The red one is Trinidad. Now notice how they've been plummeting since 2013, very sharply, but it peaked even before. Then you look at Nigeria, it's struggling at 2000. Now Guyana was also struggling at 2000. And then only because of oil, it grew by 43% in 2020. Now, Sally and so forth mentioned the rapid growth rate. That's true. But what is 43% growth when we talk of a country where income distribution is very, very bad? Like a per capita income of 11,000 or 15,000 tells me nothing unless I know how that money is distributed. So long and short, growth over time, which I'll be talking about again, is not so much in the investment in plant and equipment. These are all necessary things. But over time, it's in knowledge, how much know-how the people actually have. And that is where the Asian countries, not because they are any smarter, that is what they have done over the decades. They have invested in human capital, which means they can move up the product ladder. We see economic development is not just producing something same old way, year after years, constantly. It's about improving the product. And improving product means you're using more knowledge. Essentially, products are an embodiment of know-how, technology. And if Ghana cannot do that, we'll be stuck below 5,000 for a while. It could go up to 15 and plunge right down back to 10 and below. And we're going to see that happening in many countries. I hope it doesn't happen to Trinidad, but if you look at that red line trending down, I think we have some concerns there. Moreover, their oil is depleting.
Let's move back to Terence. Terence, if we can. Terence, we are up against it in terms of time. Are you hopeful for Ghana that Ghana will avoid the resource curse? Terence, yeah?
I am kind of 50-50 about the resource curse because of this reason. You see, the oil money is going to make a big change in spending. A wash of money is going to be in the country. My question, though, is does Guyana have the expertise and that discipline to prevent that inflow of money spilling over into the non-oil sector, making prices higher, and at the end of the day, we result in an overvalued exchange rate. That essentially is what the resource course is, or the fear of the oil leading to perverse results. I mean, we don't want to be depending on oil. We want the non-oil sector to be competitive. But the problem is that if we cannot control the exchange rate, manage the economy properly, all of it will be for naught.
All right, I'm sorry. Thank you very much indeed. Now, finally, let's move on to the chronicler of the Guyanese oil boom. He's done 86 articles in Islamic News about it, about every man, woman, and child in Ghana must know about oil. And if they've read Chris Ram, they certainly will. Accountant, lawyer, iconoclast, and all of those. Speaking to you live from Waterloo Street in Georgetown. Chris, puncture the bubble. And we have nice to have some sound from you as well.
Yes, can you hear me? Thank you very much. I agree in different ways, and a lot of the points, most of the points have been made. I think the last speakers sought to bring some reality to the numbers and to the challenges which we face. It's not going to be all smooth. Let me begin my presentation, and you can interrupt me anytime you wish, John, as you often
do. Of course I will, Chris.
Now, very coincidentally, the financial statements for the three oil companies became available to the public this week. I started a series of articles on them. These are some of the things that they show. That the total government revenue in 2021 was $351 million. Inclusive of tax credits, the oil companies netted $393 million. That is considerably more than the entire government, including the oil sector, earned. All companies are free to export all their profits and deemed profits. The government bears the cost of the oil and gas infrastructure, and the people in the country bear all the costs and suffer the consequence of displacement, resource curse, Dutch disease, pollution, and climate change. Though not easily measurable, their economic and financial consequences can be considerable, if not disastrous. The projections which we have heard, they seem to think it's going to be all one positive stream. Are we going to have any issues at all with all these projects going at the same time? I think only an optimist would take such a view. Now, inclusive of tax credits, the three oil companies earned $314 million, while the government earned in profit share $74,479 million, a ratio of 4.22.1. Part of this disparity, let me make this point and admit this, that some of that is attributable to the recovery of previous year expenses, which I think have now been recovered in full, which shows the fecundity of our basin. But it also shows that all the talk about these great risks that these oil companies undertook were probably exaggerated. The value of oil taken out of the seabed is $619 billion, 619,565 million Guyana dollars. Incidentally, $1 million just under 5,000 US dollars. So we earn $10 million on $10 billion and $619 billion taken out of the resources. The petroleum agreement provides for a 50-50 split of net revenue between the government and oil companies. The consortium is entitled to 50% of profit oil and the government to the remaining 50%. Yet the government share of profit oil is comparable to that of CNOOC, inclusive of its tax credits, which has a 25% interest in the 50%. I made a point that is unknown in recorded history, where 3 companies in a single country accounted for more revenue than the entire government of that country in a single year. I want to touch on a couple other points. So now let me say this. That's for sure. We expect things to change, but for now, those are the numbers. I want to touch on some of the issues of governance, which we've appeared to gloss over. We haven't done very well when it has come to governance. The government had committed to a number of things in the 2020 budget. That has not happened. I want to mention, for example, we don't have it committed to better contract administration and contract renegotiation. In a U-turn, the administration's new mantra is sanctity of contract, while in respect of contract administration, the government is failing to use its power to set conditions to licensees, such as not charging exploration cost of production. The sector remains under political control, no petroleum commission, and direct and indirect political control of the sector. The government committed to establishing an arm's length SWF, Sovereign Wealth Fund. Instead, the National Resource Fund establishing the SWF is woefully deficient. Not a body corporate, almost complete control of an emasculated board of directors, pending of significant drawdown, already determined by a 1-vote majority in the National Assembly. Now, one of the benefits to secure what the government has said that it would secure benefits to the local economy. Well, what have we had? We've had a Local Content Act, which is now being circumvented, largely because of an overbroad definition of local, where companies suddenly, the employees overnight become 51% majority holder, or a John Mayer living in London suddenly, because he's a Guyanese, it doesn't matter where he lives, he can take 51%, and then that is local under our legislation.
Is that an offer, Chris?
Sorry?
Is that an offer?
Well, you can ask one of the companies. I am a pure bookkeeper.
I'm just going to move you along a little bit. Now, some people say you're just a grad grind. You're looking a gift horse in the mouth. The Moray House tendency is holding Guyana back. What's your view on that?
Well, John, I expected that question. Look, people have said, oh, why are we looking back? They do not understand this contract runs in its entirety to 2056 and effectively prevents the National Assembly up to that time from making any law adverse to the economic interests of the oil companies. Now, if you were going to say that this Moray House syndrome, and I'm not sure Isabel going to like that comment, what's wrong with hearing the other side? And, as I said, 2056, John, you and I are unlikely to be around. So let us get it right. If the first year is even a minor indicator of what is going to happen, all the big numbers that we hear are not going to work in favor, as they should, in favor of the government of Guyana. You take out $696 billion and we get $10 billion replacement in your royalty. Go on, your next question, John.
So you're not optimistic, or little bit optimistic, but not very. Is that?
Well, I'm saying that things need to be done. You know, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, SWF, the local content policy. We had suggested define local to mean resident Guyanese. But what is, as I said, it has become a mockery, such a joke now that the Vice President, Barjaglio, has had to say that we'll have to perhaps turn to the courts, because the whole thing is being eroded in its intent and its operation. They said that civil society would play a central role to monitor compliance and accountability. And these are words drawn from the 2020 budget. That has not happened. I have tried to get information on the Clyde and Company report, which exposed this myth about a contract being fairly negotiated. This government has not provided that information. It has promised a revised PSA that is still to see the light of day. We have called for an inquiry into the 2016 petroleum agreement. That would be useful to know, how did we make those mistakes in the past? Unless we understand those things, we're going to be doomed to repeat them. But
if Barry was to come to you, Chris, and say, would you like to be oil minister? What would your reaction be?
I am 76, John. I am in the twilight of my life. I wouldn't want to take on that kind of responsibility. I'm not seeking a public job.
All right. So, but you're a small businessman. You will benefit from the Guyanese economy booming, won't you?
Well, we have, because we offer professional services. But I can tell you that politics are at play. Oh, you know, Rob is a politician, so you have to be careful if you use him. It's that, and those are the kinds of problems we can face if we don't treat oil in the professional and independent manner as the government promised to do in its 2020 budget speech.
A very last question from me. I've heard a whisper that you're setting up a political party. Is that true?
I haven't heard that.
Oh, the whisper hasn't reached your ears or indeed your brain. Right, thank you. If you could see everybody, please, now, if that's possible, by the magic of vision mixing. Thank you all very, very much indeed for very, very interested in our. This is on YouTube forever and a day. So if you want to pass on the URL, please do. The book, by the way, to give it another plug, is available on Amazon. But I'm going to produce a 4th edition for the autumn, and I'm looking for some kind individual, some kind company to sponsor this, so that I can go to Guyana and launch it and give it to A-level students in the university, students in GTI, because I think this is probably the only comprehensive book on oil in Guyana. So if you have money down the back of any sofas, please get in touch with me. And if you can see everybody again, please. Thank you all very much indeed. Let's end again as we began with the ExxonMobil a rather classically produced view of how they found oil in Guyana. Thank you, good night, and see you all in the autumn.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks.
Sitting on the northeast shoulder of South America is the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Meaning land of many waters, Guyana is the southernmost English-speaking state of the Caribbean community. It is one of the world's most pristine natural habitats and has one of the highest levels of biodiversity. But the Guyanese population of 800,000 also has riches that, until now, have remained hidden, offshore. To understand Guyana's present-day opportunity, we need to travel back through the mists of time to over 250 million years ago, when our world looked very different. The supercontinent of Pangaea was being pulled apart into the landmasses of North America, South America, Eurasia, and Africa. A part of the new ocean that was created is the Guyana Basin. And it is here that the ground was laid for today's exploration success. The Berbice Submarine Canyon, as big as the famous Grand Canyon, provided a highway for sediments flowing into the deeper ocean. Thousands of cubic kilometers of sand were deposited in the Guyana Basin. Some of these sands were destined to become the host rock of the modern-day Liza Field. The reservoir sands were then covered by more than 3,000 meters of sealing muds. Slowly, over millions of years, oil, created by the cooking of marine organic matter, migrated into the porous sandstone. Then, in the 21st century, 3D seismic illuminated its existence. Exploration was then intensified to further understand the potential of the Guyana Basin. With its partners, ExxonMobil undertook its largest ever proprietary 3D seismic survey. The Liza-1 exploration well discovered high-quality oil trapped in the pores of the sandstone. A year later, a second well, Liza-2, helped to confirm the size of the Liza discovery, estimated to be between 800 million and 1.4 billion barrels of oil equivalent. The oil-bearing sands are buried some 3,600 meters under the seabed, in a water depth of approximately 1,700 meters. The Liza field lies around 200 kilometers from Georgetown in the Stabroek Block. The initial phase of the field development plan calls for 2 drill centers linked back to a floating production, storage, and offloading vessel, or FPSO. Around 17 wells will be drilled into the reservoirs. About half of these are production wells, taking the precious hydrocarbons up to the surface. The other half are water and gas injection wells. As the reservoir is depleted, the pressure drops. Water and gas injection helps to maintain pressure and maximize oil recovery. The technology used here will set an industry record for deepwater gas injection. Umbilical lines provide real-time control of the subsea installation from the surface and deliver fluids to encourage the flow of hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons travel from the trees through manifolds and into flow lines before risers take the fluids from the seabed up to the FPSO. The FPSO is a floating industrial complex, continually separating water and gas from the oil, and is capable of storing 1.6 million barrels. Tankers visit to export Guyana's first oil to market. By the middle of 2020, the Liza field plans will have become a reality. The development will keep delivering its valuable commodity over a further 2 decades, providing a new source of prosperity for the people of Guyana.